Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the Gospel of John. We're in John chapter 18. Now, the last couple of sessions, we've seen that Jesus was arrested by the Jewish authorities, their soldiers, in the garden. And what comes next is really a series of 3 trials. First, he goes to Annas, who is the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. And then he goes to Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin. And then early in the morning, they're going to send Jesus on to Pilate. Those things are beginning to transpire. But in the midst of the hearings or trials before both Annas and Caiaphas, we find the 3 denials of Simon Peter. And that's what we're going to look at in today's session. That's in verses 15 through 18 and verses 25 through 27. Begin at verse 15. Now Simon Peter and another disciple were following Jesus. And because that disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard. But Peter had to wait outside at the door. Then the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, he came back, he spoke to the servant girl who was on duty, and he brought Peter in. All right, you remember, the disciples were not arrested, but they scattered after Jesus was taken in the garden. But Simon Peter and this other disciple follow from a distance. They want to see what happens. So they follow the procession of soldiers taking Jesus to see what's about to transpire. Now, Simon Peter's name, it says the other disciple, he is not named. We assume this other disciple is John himself. And it seems that John was known to some of the servants of the high priest, so he gained access into the courtyard, and he brought Peter in. So the 2 of them are there, Peter and we assume John, waiting to see what is going to happen after this arrest, what is going to happen to Jesus. And this is the time now of Peter's denial. As he brings Simon Peter in, the servant girl who let them in says, "You aren't one of this man's disciples, are you?" She says this to Peter. He said, "I am not." It was cold, and the servants and officials stood around a fire that had been made to keep them warm. Peter was there with them. He was standing warming himself. Now, Peter has shown some bravery. I mean, remember in the garden, he did draw a sword. He was ready to defend Jesus. Jesus stopped him, of course. He also followed Jesus. He's at a distance, but still he's staying close. But yet, when the question is asked directly, "Are you one of the disciples? Are you one of this guy's followers?" "No, I'm not." He becomes afraid. He's timid. What might happen to him? That's the first denial. Now let's go to verse 25. Meanwhile, Simon Peter was still standing there, and he was warming himself, still by the fire. So they asked him, those around the fire, You aren't one of his disciples too, are you?" He said, "I am not." Another of the high priest's servants, who was a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, a relative of Malchus, challenged Peter in his denials. He challenged him, Did not I see you with him in the garden?" So obviously he was one of those who accompanied the soldiers to take Jesus. He's a relative of Malchus. He recognizes Peter. "Didn't I see you in the garden?" But again, Peter denies it. And at that moment, a rooster began to crow. Now, remember, this part about the rooster goes back to the end of John chapter 13, when Jesus had told Peter he would deny him. Remember, Jesus said in verse 38 of chapter 13, just a few hours ago, "Will you really lay down your life for me, Peter? Truly I tell you, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times." Jesus' prophetic words were fulfilled. Peter had denied Jesus 3 times. And you know, when that rooster crowed, the other Gospels tell us, John doesn't mention this, but other Gospels tell us Peter went out and wept bitterly at his lack of courage and his lack of confession of who he was. Now, it's going to be interesting that later on in the book of John, in the last chapter, when we are talking about Peter again, Jesus is going to give Peter 3 opportunities to say, "I love you." We'll get to that in John chapter 21, that conversation, "Do you love me more than these?" But it's going to be interesting that when we get to John 21, Jesus is going to ask the question 3 times. I think he's going to give Peter a chance 3 times to say, "I love you," because 3 times on this night, Peter had said, "I don't even know him. I deny that I'm his disciple." Okay, this was the 3 denials of Peter. Now, tomorrow's session, we're going to look at the trials. The one before Annas, the one before Caiaphas, and then, of course, before Pilate. Those will transpire over the course of Thursday night into early Friday morning. We'll begin to look at those in our next session. So join us next time for our 5-minute Bible study in the Gospel of John.